Hey Ken, how you doing? Hey, we match.
Yeah, there you go.
Well,
How you doing,
awesome.
Jeff?
Great, Ken. Thank you so much. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Awesome, awesome. I suppose we might as well do the proverbial get on to it.
All right, we can do that.
All right, sir. Folks, we're so pleased today to be spending some time with preeminent scholar and historian of American professional football, one Mr. Ken Crippen. According to your biography on kencrippen.com, you've got more than 20 years in the professional football research game as president and executive director of the Professional Football Researchers Association, and your most current venture, the Football Learning Academy. So hoping we can talk about all these things today.
That sounds great.
Right, and I see we match with our backgrounds. We want to drive the point home here that the Football Learning Academy is here to help the players of yesteryear and educate professional football fans. But I guess we should start at the proverbial beginning. And I just wonder, what was it, whether it's teams or players or particular era or particular moments that really sparked your enduring curiosity about American professional football?
I've been a Bills fan all my life, so always following the Bills and seeing how they're doing, and started looking into their history. Once I started digging into it, I became more and more interested, and just kept digging farther and farther and farther, and then it just expanded outside of teams within Buffalo. So it just kind of grew from just being a football fan and being a Buffalo Bills fan.
Awesome, awesome. Have to ask the question, if there is a Super Bowl between the 65 Packers and Bills, who wins it?
Of course, I'm going Bills.
I asked because I saw on your website, on your personal website, a scouting report about Don Hutson, kind of going back and doing a nice little kind of comparison there. And I just wondered, if you've done something like that, similarly trying to compare strengths of these Super Bowls that never were. But what, in your opinion, is the strongest Bills team ever?
It's tough to say whether it was the 1990 team or the 1964 team. I mean, the defense on that 64 team was just amazing. And then obviously the offense on the 90 team was amazing. So I would say it's probably one of those two teams.
Are you excited about their prospects right now?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously they got pretty close to the Super Bowl last year. I have high expectations for this year. So hopefully they do well.
Awesome. Awesome. I wanted to first focus on the Football Learning Academy, and you do have an Instagram page, and we'll put all these links in our show description. But as you state the organization's mission, your aim is to give back to retired players in need, and you do this by providing online classes, videos, and a blog on football history and the impact the game has on society. I just wondered if you would kind of talk about the origin of the FLA and what indeed that impact is of the game on society.
Well, I would say that the origin of the FLA is really trying to take what I've been doing in the past and taking it to another level. I love teaching football history. I love talking about the game, talking about the history of the game, talking about the players. So I kind of wanted to put this into class format in order to be able to educate people on the history of the game and try to be able to put it into historical context. You had also mentioned our mission about helping retired players. So, I mean, they've been very good to me over the years with granting me interviews and giving me background material on stuff that I'm writing, helping me get in touch with their teammates, things like that. So, as you're going through and interviewing these players and talking to them and forming a bond with them, you really hear a lot of the struggles that they're going through. I mean, not only the CTE issues, Alzheimer's, dementia as well, but all the multiple surgeries that they're going through with just their bodies getting beaten up over the years. So a lot of them, they struggle being able to pay their medical bills because they're not making the millions of dollars like some of the athletes like today are making. So I want to be able to give back to them the way they've been helping me out. So that's why, we're trying to give back. So a portion of all the sales from the FLA is going to directly to helping retired players in need.
Excellent, excellent. And it really does. There is that stark contrast we discuss. You can't help discuss it when you talk about American professional football, the NFL, especially from certainly from the merger onward. But the sea change in the monetization of the game and the lucrative career path it is for players of the more recent past, the past 4 decades or so. And I just wonder, do you have any provisions for maybe reaching out to current players, current organizations, and maybe enlisting their help or their awareness building possibilities?
Yeah, I am. I'm working with some of the retired players organizations, working with some of the more recent retired players, trying to focus on all the good works that they're doing, as well as what can we do to try to raise awareness for everything that's going on, and be able to actually help them. So, yeah, I mean, I've taken multiple avenues in doing that, and we're going to see what we can do to help these retired players in need.
Are there any partner organizations that kind of dovetail with your mission so that you maybe assist each other?
There are some. I mean, we haven't formalized those agreements yet, so I can't really announce anything. But yeah, I mean, we're definitely working on trying to get those relationships put together, because there are some organizations that have, like you said, similar missions, and what can we do to work together in order to be able to accomplish that mission?
Being that you are the PFRA, and obviously football being as statistically based as it is, I'm just curious if you have kind of a general uh, number of retired players living today and numbers who are in need of assistance, kind of a demographic breakdown of the issues that you're trying to address.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really have concrete numbers on that, mainly because, there's still a stigma out there, as far as being able to ask for help. Especially, these big tough guys that are beating each other up every day. They don't want to admit that they need help. And so we really don't have accurate numbers of retired players who really need the help. So basically, we're just going to focus on the players that say that they need some assistance in some way, and do everything that we can to help them.
Certainly, you mentioned the CTE, the specter of CTE, and I can't help but imagine that certainly brought some focus to the fore, of course, and it feels as though a lot of the retired players are maybe overcoming that stigma, or their families are doing it in their name.
hmm Yeah, I would agree with that. That there's more awareness on it. Unfortunately, you can't diagnose it until after the player is passed, but there are symptoms out there that you can take a look at. And so, if they're experiencing any of those symptoms, we hope that they're going to reach out to try to get some help and see what we can do to take care of them, as well as taking care of their families, so that everybody understands what the player is going through and what we can do to help them.
Excellent, excellent. Uh, Speaking about building on football historical football efforts to create a football history, document it with the PFRA. Can you briefly walk us through kind of the origins of the PFRA, what the motivation was, and how you kind of shaped the vision over time to what the PFRA is now?
Yeah, it started back in 1979. That's when it was incorporated. So the mission is education. They wanted to educate people on the history of the game. They also wanted to make sure that the history of the game is accurate. There was a lot of myths out there, a lot of inaccurate information. So the goal was to try to make sure everything was, is going to be accurate and telling the full story. A lot of the stuff that's out there right now is the result of all the work that the PFRA has done over many decades. So I got into a leadership position around 2006. I've been a member since about 1990, 1989, somewhere in that area. So when I took over the organization, what I wanted to do is make sure that I continued that mission, because obviously that is the foundation of the PFRA, as well as now the foundation of the FLA is educating people. I also wanted to do more outreach. I wanted to make sure that people knew about the PFRA and they knew that we existed and that they can see the work that we're doing. And so the organization has definitely grown. It's had more of a social media presence, as well as presence within um, press articles, doing work on radio shows, podcasts, things like that. Just trying to get this information out there, not only talking about the PFRA, but also talking about whatever subjects are of interest to those particular hosts. A lot of work has been done on the Hall of Very Good as far as getting that information out there. I mean, it's at a point now where the teams are picking up on that. I remember when Bob Skoronski was inducted into our Hall of Very Good, the Green Bay Packers took out a full page ad in our magazine to congratulate him on that. So it's definitely getting the attention of national media as well as the teams themselves, the national beat writers, the local beat writers. I think it's definitely helped with the outreach that we've been working on as a team.
Excellent. Speaking of that your work being picked up by the broader media environment, certainly John Turney's work, that project got a lot of traction. That crediting sacks from the 1960 to 1981 season before it became officially a statistic in the 1982 strike season. Just curious, do you continue to hear positive feedback about that project, that work?
Yeah, definitely, especially when people are making Hall of Fame cases for some of the senior candidates. They definitely look to the information that John Turney and Nick Webster put together to make sure that they're using that to help make those cases. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely yeoman's work that the two of them did on this, and they deserve all that credit and all that attention for the years and years of work that they put into that.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, I understand there was a lot of film study going back several decades.
Film study, going through game books, things like that, newspaper accounts where they didn't have either one of those. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of work that goes into trying to complete those records. And you know, the farther you go back, the more difficult it's going to be, obviously. So we may not get stuff from the 50s, we may not get stuff from the 40s, but yeah, at least being able to go back to 1960 is definitely important.
And that calls to mind, there are instructions for NFL statisticians, but as I recall in speaking with John about his work with Nick, that it seemed as though there's maybe some inconsistency team to team in terms of the records that they've retained. Is that indeed the case? And is there a way or a motivation to maybe codify and streamline and make more losing the word here, but to
Yeah.
make this a more uniform effort team to team?
Yeah, without having game film for every one of these games, it's going to be difficult because, like you said, statisticians, it's subjective. What's a sack? Who gets the full sack? Who gets half a sack? It's the exact same thing with tackles too. You'll see, homerism associated with that because it's usually the home team statistician that's putting that together. So sometimes you'll see things get bumped up a little bit. And so without that game film to be able to back up what you see in the official records, it's going to be tough to do that. So it'd be great if we could to codify that, but even today, um, it's better, but it's still subjective to a certain extent as far as who gets credit for things. I mean, you can have one tackle, and three or four guys will get credit. Each get half a tackle with that. That's obviously not correct, but that's the way it is.
That reminds me of the story of L.C. Greenwood wearing the yellow shoes and sticking his legs up in the air to try to get credit for sacks. It's by any means necessary, I guess.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, your contracts are based on it, so they're going to want to get those stats.
For sure, for sure. Going back even farther, I noticed a post on Instagram today from the Academy that you're running a series of posts detailing the history of the Syracuse Athletic Association's football team, this from 1890 to 1900. And I wonder, that's certainly can be a hard era, I think, for any folks, particularly even youngsters today who are maybe fans of professional football, to kind of comprehend and to grasp. And certainly, you know, in the origins of college football being here in New Jersey in the 19th century. And I just wonder, what are some of the most important impacts from those most formative eras? I mean, whether it's, you know, the establishment of competition rules or um, monetizing the sport itself.
Yeah, I think taking a look at the evolution as it's going from rugby and soccer combining together, and then the customized rules on that game, you know, creating the line of scrimmage, the neutral zone, all those types of things, the snap back from the center to the quarterback, all of those changes, you know, helped form the game that we know right now. So I think that's the important thing, is seeing that evolution going through. The forward pass, if you had to put, you know, onto one specific rule change, legalizing the forward pass in 1906 is probably one of the biggest ones, because you would not have the offenses like you do today without the forward pass.
Excellent, excellent. And you know, and speaking about the origin and the evolution of the game, rather, it's that perpetual barstool conversation. You know, could this gentleman or that gentleman play in today's game? I mean, going back to Thorpe and Nagurski, Fears and Hirsch. You know, if you consider the '50 Rams, the early '50s Rams, the original greatest show on turf, you know, or Otto Graham, or you know, even a lot of folks will say that maybe Unitas or Butkus could really translate to today's game. I wonder what's your take on some of the greats of the past and their prospects in an NFL where, you know, a career is truly a lifetime. You know, and you've got that year-round training and nutrition, et cetera, all that discipline and expectation.
Yeah, I mean, and you definitely see the natural skill sets in some of these older players that would definitely translate to today, especially when you start factoring in all of the, like you said, the nutrition, the year-round training, all of that kind of stuff. And then you also take a look at it too. Look at the reverse. How well would today's players be able to play back in those eras? You have a 350-pound lineman. Are they going to play 60 minutes? You know, a quarterback that can get clotheslined all the time. You know, it's definitely different. So it makes it tough comparing between eras. But I think there are some things that you can take a look at as far as who excelled within their particular era, and then be able to do comparisons that way.
Interesting. You know, you have the folks who look at stats, and I noticed that one of the outlets you've written for is Cold Hard Football Facts. I don't believe they're still working in the same capacity as they had been, but I remember a piece they did on clutch quarterbacks, and you know, Terry Bradshaw is kind of a really difficult figure to discuss. I mean, he's got the 4 Super Bowl rings, tons of playoff wins, but he just doesn't have the numbers because he truly is the embodiment of the evolving from that quote dead ball era to the '78, you know, no holds barred post Mel Blunt rule era. I just wonder where you come down. You know, is part of your mission kind of letting people see beyond the stats, you know, the pure numbers, and you know, as you say, you know, the quarterback's playing under very different conditions then versus now.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I always say is stats without context are meaningless. So if you want to just look at, okay, well, what's the quarterback rating for this particular quarterback and compare him to somebody else based on the quarterback rating? Well, what's the offensive schemes? You know, it favors people who have short dump off passes. Well, if you don't have a receiver that can have yards after the catch, then your rating is going to be lower because you don't have a lot of yards. You may have a lot of completions, but you don't have a lot of yards. So you really need to put everything into context if you're going to look at stats. Then you also look at the intangibles that go along with that. You know, you look at a quarterback, you know, the field general. How are they able to manage the game? How are they able to see what's going on? Are they going to, you know, be able to look at the entire field in order to be able to go down their progression? So, yeah, it's something that I think that you got to avoid just looking at stats. You got to go beyond that. So I have done work with Cold Hard Football Facts. I created my own rusher rating system similar to the passer rating. So you're able to, you know, rank running backs across eras because we were normalizing so that we can see, how people performed across eras. But, what was nice is that, you can see how offenses were performing, how defenses were performing. You look at the running backs in each of the gaps, the A, B, and C gaps, as well as going around the outside. You can see, okay, well, this particular running back against this defense, performs the best going through the B gap on the left side, those types of things. So definitely it was, something that you can take a look at. But again, stats without context are meaningless. So you got to be able to put it in the entire context so you can see exactly what are these stats telling me and what are these stats not able to tell me based off of the information that's being provided.
Interesting. Context. Speaking of contextualization, as I've mentioned, and I'm glad you brought up the single platoon era of football. Don Hutson, the Packers, in our little world here in APBA football, card gaming, tabletop simulation, Don Hutson is the first receiver to receive an asterisk, which in the game indicates that a defense, he was so untouchable that seemingly so that his boost to the offense cannot be negated in any way, shape, or form by the defense. You performed a scouting report in 2016 and you documented his roughly 10-year career, I think 35 to 45. And I just wonder if you might be able to summarize some of that, because it's just a really interesting point in the context of this game, but also in the era of here's someone who really was a game changer.
You watch him running his routes and you can see the greatness there, and you can see how he was so much better than everyone else. And, playing against those defenses that he was able to just pick them apart. Yeah, I mean, he was great on offense. Defense, they had him as a defensive back, got 30 some odd interceptions, which, for an end was good because most ends were playing defensive end instead of defensive back. So obviously he's going to have more opportunities, but just his offensive skills were just off the charts. And watching him running those routes, watching him pick apart those defenses was just, absolutely incredible. And so, you talk about whether he was the greatest of all time, Jerry Rice was the greatest of all time. I mean, you got 1 and 1A for each one of those. Whoever you pick as the top, then the other one is right there. So, yeah, just he was absolutely incredible.
And then you get folks like Biletnikoff or McGee, who were, well, Biletnikoff specifically, I guess they're rather different players, but a guy like Fred Biletnikoff, certainly maybe not the fastest guy, but just knew how to, had the impeccable football savvy to be where he needed to be at any given time against any given defense, seemingly.
Right. And that's, when you're looking at some of these combine stats, it's like guy runs a 4.34 or something like that. Well, yeah, who cares? How is he going to do against a defensive back? That's can also run somewhere around the same. So you got to have the skills and the knowledge and the field awareness to be able to know, okay, where do I need to go in order to make sure that I'm open? How can I make sure that I put myself in a good position so that the quarterback can get me the ball? And then, those are the intangibles that you're not going to get running cone drills or running a 40-yard dash or anything like that. So again, it gets back to what I had said before about stats without context are meaningless. I don't care what you run in the 40 if you can't get open. So it's a combination of all of that is what makes receivers like Biletnikoff, great receivers.
One of the things that's always fascinated me is kind of the transition from the 4-3, Landry's 4-3 to the 3-4. And you saw it, I guess, with the Chiefs a bit, the Dolphins maybe a bit in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. And then you'd see some of the AFL teams, Broncos, Raiders, Patriots, Oilers running 3-4 in that predominantly 4-3 era. Didn't seem to phase, the Steelers or, the Cowboys, defending against or operating offensively against these teams. And then you still saw the league, transition, wholeheartedly into that 3-4 defense. I just wonder if over time you've gauged the overall effectiveness of the 4-3 versus the 3-4. And obviously, it's a very fluid thing, given your personnel. But I just wonder in the most general sense, if there's any hard data that says one era or another was the most effective, given the fact that, of course, you're building offenses to counter what the defense is throwing at you and vice versa.
I personally have not. I imagine there are probably some coaches out there that are taking a look at that, where they can see, okay, specific schemes where, based on the personnel, do you have the weaknesses? I mean, you could run a 4-3 or a 3-4 and still have the same results. A lot of it's going to come down to, like you said, the personnel that you have and how you're scheming using that personnel and those formations. I mean, you see, how they morph it into some other defenses, whether it's Tampa 2 or anything like that. You're showing one front and then you're changing to another front post snap. So, you know, that type of deception definitely has an impact. And that's not necessarily the um, base scheme that they're in, it's how they're using that scheme. And then, of course, how they're using the personnel with that scheme and the talent level of that personnel. So, I personally have not looked at that, but I imagine coaches have probably taken a look at that and come up with their own statistics based off the teams they're playing.
Interesting. Interesting. I feel as though we go back to the 1950s. Paul Brown, again Otto Graham, the Browns appearing in something like 7 straight NFL title games. I feel as though because of the advent of TV and kind of the colorful 60s, the advent of the AFL and the vertical game, I feel as though the 50s kind of recedes from memory a bit, but it's really a formative era. I mean, can you put that in context for folks who may kind of stop around Lombardi's Packers and not go farther back to the 40s and 50s, where again you had Sammy Baugh and the Redskins, and you had you know a real evolutionary moment there.
Yeah, I'd say for me, one of the most fascinating eras is the 1940s, because not only did you have a lot of players overseas, you had some teams merging because they didn't have the players here. You had the All American Football Conference that was competing against the NFL at that time. Like you were talking about the Browns, 1946 is when they started, 10 straight championship games, winning 7 of them, including, the first undefeated season of a major pro team in 1948. So it's fascinating. And then, you start getting all the players coming back. Now you have a lot more that are on the field. They can go from the single platoon system over to the 2 platoon system. You're seeing that in the 40s, getting into the early 50s. You also have the change from single wing to T formation. So that's obviously a big change. So all of that's happening in the 1940s. Then as you're getting to the 1950s, you're seeing, some different defenses coming in, some different types of offenses, plus, just the massive amount of talent. And because they had the 2 platoon system, people are resting more. So you can focus more on specific skill sets. So the quarterback doesn't have to go out there and play linebacker. They can just focus on being a quarterback. And so, the skills are going to improve as you start specializing like that. So, yeah, I mean, definitely people need to look prior to 1960. And I would say, for me, I love going all the way back, but at a minimum, take a look at everything that happened in the 40s and 50s. And that really allows you to put the game into perspective as far as how it evolved into the 1960s with the AFL and the aerial attack that you're getting off of there, and then how that influenced the NFL once the two merged. So yeah, it's a fascinating time, and I definitely encourage people to take a look at that. I know there's a lot of YouTube videos out there for these older games. Go check them out and just see how these teams were playing back then.
And that reminds me too. We talk about the greatest game ever played, the 58 overtime Giants Colts game,
Mhm.
but the league was really exciting, as you say. I mean, there's a lot going on. Can you really pinpoint that 58 game as being the moment that the the pro football came to the fore in the American consciousness, or was it kind of a steadier build than we're kind of led to believe?
I think it was a steadier build, in my opinion. I mean, what makes the 58 game unique is the fact that, okay, it's on TV. You can watch that. There were some TV and radio games prior to that, but, you add in the fact that this was a sudden death game. And so now, as a result, you've got these two things making this the quote unquote greatest game of all time, because it was obviously very exciting down to the very end. But it really was a gradual increase from there. Just those two particular items pushed it over the top, and that's why people point to that particular game.
Now we've had the this past year, we've had the XFL, the USFL came back. I'm just wondering, obviously, given the talent pool expanding as it has, if those leagues will grow into consideration as part of the true American pro football constellation. Do you think there's a chance of them to gain the ground in popularity to some extent? Obviously, the NFL is miles and miles ahead, but do you think that these leagues? I mean, there have been so many attempts at this. Of course, the World Football League and the European leagues, etc. Like, there's an Italian league too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that something is going to happen with that. There are obviously too many minor leagues out there right now. But I do think the NFL is going to try to come up with some sort of developmental league in order to be able to have some additional players in the queue. So that way, if there's some decimation to the roster because of injuries, they can start pulling them up from these minor league teams.
Speaking of that, actually, of course, we went to a 17-game season this year. We used to have a 6-game preseason in the 70s, and then we had the 16-game season in 78. And I'm just wondering if you think we'll eventually see a 20-game NFL season.
I don't think we're going to see 20. I do see 18 at some point, especially when they want to focus on international games. So they're probably going to make sure that you have a couple of internationals for every team. But I don't see it getting to 20. The union, I think, would definitely shut that down. But I think the compromise would probably be we get to 18, and that's about the extent of it.
What's one rule that you would love to see the NFL institute to either enhance competition or enhance parity, or do you even believe parity is a good thing in the league? I guess that's a two-part question.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with parity in the league. You don't want to see the same teams winning all the time. So if there's some way to make sure that the competition is leveled out, I'm all for that. I don't think of a rule necessarily that I want to add. It's more of stop messing with overtime. So to me, having this, well, we got to go, this team needs another chance and all that. No, there are three aspects to football: offense, defense, and special teams. If you fail and you lose, that's your fault. You had 60 minutes to try to beat the other team. So that's my opinion, that stop messing with overtime, put it back to the way it should be, and go from there. And I'm saying that as a Bills fan after last season. So
exactly. Here. Who's your favorite Bill of all time?
That one's a tough one. I'd probably have to say Jim Kelly. If you want to go back to the older days, I always loved Tom Day. So if you want the AFL Bills, I would say Tom Day was my favorite. And then the more recent ones in the last few decades would be Jim Kelly.
Awesome. A real
now Josh Allen.
Yeah, for sure. That's right. That new era. Sir, thank you. This has been such a pleasurable experience and really informative. Just last thing I wanted to ask is, how can football fans get involved with the Football Learning Academy's mission? What can folks do to assist you?
I would say go to our website, football-learning-academy.com. Sign up for any of the classes, any of the paid classes. Money is going to help those retired players. If you want to spread the word, tell all your friends, tell everybody you know, anybody who's a football fan who would be interested in hearing about football history. Send them over to the website. It's not specifically on the old time football stuff. I mean, we've got, several interviews with female trailblazers in the NFL. So if you want to listen to those interviews, we're going to have additional interviews going forward. So there's a lot there for people to like, regardless of what your interest is in football. So, spread the word and go over and check it out.
Awesome, sir. We will do that indeed. Thank you so much for your insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Awesome. And best of luck to the FLA.
Thank you. I appreciate it.